Portraits can be a really challenging subject, so in this tutorial I'm going to give you some of my favourite tips on drawing skin using pastels. I'm Kirsty Rebecca and I make drawing and painting tutorials that are easy to follow even if you're just starting out. I'm working on Clairefontaine Pastelmat, which is my favourite paper to use with pastels, and I've cut my sheet down to an 11 inch by 14 inch size. So I find that it's easier to start with the lightest colour first because the highlighted areas are usually the most prominent and easy to see. I've noticed that the brightest highlight is more of a yellow creamy colour, whereas the second lightest part is more of a pinky orangey colour, so I move on to that colour next. The first thing that you need to know is that there isn't going to be a perfect colour or colour combination for a certain skin tone. I could take a photo of the same person in 3 different types of lighting and the skin is going to look completely different in each lighting. There's no such thing as the perfect skin colour for light skin tones or dark skin tones. Skin reflects the colour around it, so it's going to be different in every piece of artwork that you do, even if you're drawing the same person. So what I like to do is create colour swatches from my reference photo so that I can really clearly see the colours that I need to use in each area. And I actually did this using the Paint program, but you can use Photoshop or an online program like GIMP, anything that has an eyedropper tool. And you can just select an area with the eyedropper and then paint a swatch on the side of that colour. This is really helpful to be able to choose my colours correctly. So I'm starting out with an outline that looks really quite detailed, and that's because I actually drew in where all of the light parts and the dark parts are going to go and where the colours change, and this will make it easier to apply that base layer. I'm using pan pastels for the base layer, which are just a soft pastel that's been compressed into a pan, and you apply them with these soft tools, and that's SOFFT, that's the brand name, and I'm using quite a small tool for most of it. And these are great because unlike traditional soft pastels, you can actually blend these on a separate piece of paper before going into your artwork. The paper that I'm blending the colours on is just printer paper, and I can mix my colours there before I apply it to my artwork so I know exactly what colour I'm going to get. Also, if you're using traditional soft pastel sticks, it can be very hard to blend colours, so that's why you see many pastel artists with hundreds and hundreds of different pastels, because you can't actually blend the colours very easily. You can layer them on top of each other on your work, but with pan pastels you really only actually need 5 colours. Like you can use red, blue, yellow, black and white and mix any colour that you like, just like paints. And as I said earlier, there isn't one perfect colour for skin tones, so I'm using about 10 different colours to mix the colours that I need for each section. And once I've gotten in those highlight colours, I'm moving on to the next obvious colour for me, which is those purpley pink tones in the shadow areas. And this is why it's really important to study your reference photo and make those colour swatches, because it wouldn't be really obvious to use such a bright purple or pink in these areas, but when you look at the photo, they really are quite bright. So I'm mixing up that colour and applying it to the artwork where I see that colour, which is mainly on the left-hand side and underneath her eyes. The skin is this colour because it's reflecting the colours from the background, so if I took a photo of this girl in different lighting, there probably wouldn't be such bright purple in that area. Then I'm moving on to the next most obvious colour to me, which is the darkest areas. I'm making sure that I'm going as dark as the reference photo is, and it can seem really scary to go this dark on a portrait, but you really need those darks there for your drawing to look realistic. And then once I've got those darkest shadows in, all I have left to block in are the mid-tones. And these are more of a peachy colour, so I'm mixing that colour to apply there as well. And again, it's not just one peachy colour over the entire skin. There are slightly darker areas and slightly lighter areas with different amounts of reds or purples or yellows in each section. So I'm paying attention to those colour shifts in the reference photo and just slowly filling in the rest of the face. This layer always looks a little bit scary because of all the vibrant colours, but once we've blended it out and started adding in more layers, it will look a lot more natural. Especially when I add the background in, that will make the purple areas look way less vibrant and more natural. I've also done a quick base layer on the eyebrow area and also the lips with the pan pastels. And I'm not adding in the eyes or any of the small details in this layer because the tools that you use with the pan pastels are a little bit too big for that. So I'll just go straight in with pastel pencils for those areas in the next layer. So I'm blending out this layer with a cotton tip, and you could also use a blending stump if you like. And the reason that you need to blend the layers when you're working with pastels is for a couple of reasons. One is that the colours will blend together a little bit more with softer transitions and a smoother result, which will help make your entire drawing look smoother. But the second reason is that your paper will have a limit to how many layers you can add. So by pushing the pastel into the tooth of the paper, it helps you add those additional layers. And if you don't know what I mean by tooth, basically your paper has little hills and valleys, and once you've filled up those valleys, your paper becomes very slick and it's hard to add more layers on top. So when you blend the pastel, it pushes that pigment and the dust into the grooves and it allows for more layers to be added on top. Whereas if you didn't blend at all, you'll find that you fill up the tooth of the paper quite quickly and it'd be very hard to add those additional layers. And I also blend this layer with my finger over the top just to really make sure it's blended out nicely. Before I show you how I start adding in those details, if you want to follow along with my longer real-time tutorials where I talk you through every step of the process, then Patreon might be the solution for you. For a small amount per month, you'll have access to every tutorial that I've previously uploaded on your chosen tier level in a variety of mediums like pastel, coloured pencil, graphite, watercolour and more. You will also have access to the original reference photo, a traceable outline, and a list of supplies that I'm using so you really can follow along every step of the way. My tutorials don't skip any stages or cut out any important parts of the process, and I will share all of my secrets to help you improve. Every month, I will upload brand new tutorials to the library so you can grow and develop your drawing and painting skills and take your art to the next level. You can also join in on our members chat group where you can ask questions or advice or share your artwork and talk to other members in the Patreon community. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. So on this layer, I'm going to use mostly pastel pencils. And I'm going to start with the eye area first. And the reason that I start out with the eyes on this layer is because the pupils and the area around the eyes usually has the darkest values or shadows and also the brightest highlights. So by getting the eyes in first, it means that I can better judge my values for the rest of my piece and compare each section to the eye area to see if it's dark or light enough. When you're working on the whites of the eyes, just keep in mind that the white is never really white. It's usually much darker than you'd expect, so the color swatches can really help you see what color you need to use there. I also wouldn't add in the eyelashes until later on in your drawing in case you need to make any adjustments to the eyes. If you add the eyelashes, it can be really hard to alter things around them, so I usually just save them for a bit later on. Then I'm moving on to each section of the skin and then brightening up the colors by lightly laying pastel pencils over the top. And using the pastel pencils is a bit different to blending with pan pastels, but I'm following the same principle where I'm using more than one color in each section to create the color that I need. So for example, if there's a pinky peach color, I may add some reds or some oranges and some browns and maybe some yellows until I get the color that I'm after. It really is just a layering process. But I'm following a similar pattern to the pan pastel layer where I'm starting in the light areas and then moving on to the purple and pink areas and just altering the colors as I go along. Once I've added in a layer with the pencils, I blend it out again with the cotton tip or my fingers before adding more layers on top. And you can add quite a few layers on Pastelmat in comparison to a generic paper labeled as pastel paper. Not all pastel papers are created equally, so choosing a sanded paper or a Pastelmat will help you be able to add more layers, which will create a more realistic skin tone in the end. So once I've done a couple of layers, before I start tweaking the final details on the skin, while I still have some tooth of my paper left, I actually take a photo of my work and change it into black and white, and then take my reference photo and change that to black and white and compare the two. The most important part of realism is your values. If you get your shadows dark enough and your highlights light enough, that's more important than getting your colors right. So this is a really great way to check if your values are right. And this method also helps you to see if your features and the shapes are in the right spot or if there's anything that needs tweaking. Like for example, in my drawing, the eyebrow on our right comes too far towards the nose. The slant in the neck needs to be straighter. The angle of the lips is a little bit off, and the highlight on the left-hand side of her nose needs to come down a little bit. And also the waterline on the left-hand side eye is a bit too dark. It's harder to see these kinds of adjustments that need to be made when you're working on your drawing. So by doing this, it takes away that color aspect and allows you to just focus on the shapes and values. So I do this as many times as I need to throughout the process, so I'll do that and then I'll go and make all the changes and then I'll do it again to compare, just to make sure, especially if you're doing a commission of somebody where it has to look exactly like that person. This is a really great way of checking. So I'm going back into my artwork and making all of these little adjustments before I add those final details. And I'm also adjusting any of the colours that need to be changed slightly as well. If you want to see how I drew this entire piece in real time, including the hair and the background, there's a 4.5-hour tutorial on Patreon for you, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check it out. The playlist on the screen has a bunch of other pastel tutorials that I thought you might find helpful, so click on that and I'll see you over there.